Amandla. Awethu. 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 Matla. Thank you very much. President of UNI, General Secretary, members of the National or the Executive Committee, delegates to this August and historic UNI Global Conference happening in South Africa. Thank you very much, friends. Welcome to South Africa, and thank you for inviting me to address the largest ever Global Union meeting in Africa, the UNI Global Union in Durban. Thank you, the UNI leadership, for the wonderful opening ceremony. In particular, thank you for joining us at a time when we're celebrating the life of that colossal giant and an international icon, Nelson Mandela. Thank you for playing and translating that song from Yusundo, the New Africa song. Its lyrics move me intensely. You represent and fight for millions of most exploited and vulnerable workers in a vast range of jobs: cleaning, security, commerce, finance, gaming, graphical, packing, hair and beauty, information, communication, technology, media, entertainment, and arts, post and logistics, social insurance, sport, temp and agency workers, and tourism industries, as well as professionals and managers. In our country, your scope covers a number of COSATU affiliated unions, which are also your affiliates. Salute them all, the leaders of SACAU, SASBO, SATAU, and Communication Workers Union. On behalf of the toiling masses of our people, we want to thank you for choosing our continent, Africa, our country, South Africa, and the city of Cape Town for your 4th World Congress. As we have said, this was done deliberately to coincide with our celebration of the 20th anniversary of our democratic breakthrough. Your convergence in our shores is yet another important reminder to not only South Africa, but humanity as a whole, of the critical importance of human solidarity. Together, we defeated that abhorrent system correctly declared by the United Nations as a crime against humanity. And I want to thank you and your unions for the role you played in the struggle to defeat the apartheid system. I know each one of you sitting in your seats today represent millions of workers across the globe who, as Comrade Bones Kulu, the General Secretary of SACAU and the Chair President of UNI Africa region, said in the opening ceremony, that you marched, you held pickets and other forms of demonstrations. You refused to handle goods from apartheid South Africa. You pressured your governments to impose economic sanctions and provided immeasurable material support to our unions and our liberation movement. Without all of this, you will not be sitting in your seats today. This was the biggest success story of international solidarity. Nelson Mandela would have died in prison. Oliver Tambo would have died in exile. And many of the comrades who received you in South Africa and were part of your delegation to this August conference would have died either in detention, would have been executed like Zwelinzima, would have perished within the borders and outside the borders of South Africa. Without that national and international organization opposition to apartheid, the country is likely to have slipped into a bloody civil war that would have ended in a common ruin of all contending forces, exactly as you see the price being paid today by the people of Syria. And for all of this, we don't want for a minute to take your contributions for granted. We will be forever indebted to all of you, the international brothers, sisters, comrades, and friends. Thank you very much for that once more. There is an interference. There is an interference. With that background said, we want to affirm your right to want to know what is happening in South Africa, what has been the developments in the first 20 years of our democracy, what have been the achievements, and what are the setbacks. Comrade Ibrahim Patel, the former General Secretary of COSATU, who opened this conference on behalf of government in his capacity as the Minister of Economic Development, spoke about some issues of progress, such as the very constitution. You see that interference? It's now causing havoc here. SABC, you are in trouble. You have been shifted aside. Don't know whether this scene have been brought to you by the Chairperson Matters or the COO. I don't know. But I know that you have been in the news for all the wrong reasons. My solidarity goes to all of you, the staff of SABC, who have to work under these circumstances. I was saying that Ibrahim Patel spoke about some of the achievements we have registered when he spoke about these on Sunday in the opening ceremony. These were and have been the attempts by our government to bury the legacy of apartheid and segregation and all the discriminatory practices. I have no intention of repeating the statistics which illustrate progress made in particular on social issues such as delivery of water, electricity, houses, and social security. These advances must not be sneezed at, but we ignore the remaining challenges and setbacks at our own peril. It is this that I want to highlight in my address today, because it is around these challenges that we can once again make a common international cause. Notwithstanding the areas of progress, the South African working class majority continues to face the same old problems: poverty pay, casualization, job insecurity, discrimination, racism, and health and safety dangers. At the same time, our employers are getting bigger and bigger, richer and richer, and inequality between the rich and the poor is growing. I wonder how many of you know that you are meeting in the world's most unequal society, as defined by the measure called the Gini coefficient, which have risen from already a disastrous 0.64 in 1994 to the current catastrophic levels of 0.69 in just 10 years. Further, proof of this inequality has emerged in one of the Sunday papers which publishes the annual Rich List. The latest edition 2 days ago exposed just how much some of the rich people, including the employers, are taking home, how much they own. Just 10 of them collectively own a 205 billion rands, 10 people. On top of the list, in terms of the highest earners, is the CEO of Anglo-American, a certain gentleman called Mark Kutefani from Australia, based here in South Africa, who have scored in 1 year a 107 million rands, and who earned that amount despite the mining companies wholly rejecting a demand for a 12,500 minimum wage for workers who go deep down 4 kilometers underground to risk everything they have, their limbs and their life, to risk producing profit that he clearly is enjoying on his own. The second in that rich list is another fellow making more sense to you in the financial sector, the CEO of a company from South Africa, Old Mutual, now listed in the New York Stock Exchange. The CEO, Julian Roberts, raked in 1 year 73 million rands. The CEO of another company you organize, ShopRite, a gentleman called Witty Basson, made 49.6 million rands last year, or in dollars, a 4.32 US dollars in millions, just in 1 year. The same company chairperson, Christo Wiso, is the second richest South African, sitting on a 874 million rands of wealth. Whilst these mining and financial and retail bosses accumulate such wealth, the workers who create it face a daily battle to keep their jobs and put food on the table of their families. They struggle to get the public holidays and are at risk from armed robbers at work, and all for poverty pay. And they do this in the face of ever-increasing prices of the same basic goods that they pack into the supermarket shelves or take money for at the checkout till. price increases that not only do not benefit retail workers, but also do not benefit the producers in the food value chain. So the greed of the retail giants fuels the wealth that poverty wages of farm workers. I'm sure this is a story that retail workers around the world are familiar with. Monopolization of the economy and the concentration of wealth is, of course, one factor which fuels this growing inequality. When right-wing analysts praise our free market economy, I often point out the fact that whenever a new shopping mall is going up, we predict with certainty which big retail stores will be there, as it is all carved up in advance with the mall owners to exclude any serious competitor. We recently witnessed the irony of legal action taken by giant multinational companies here in Cape Town against our two local retail monopolies, ShopRite Checkers and Pick n Pay. Not, of course, that this, the biggest private employer and the largest retailer in the world, Walmart, with over 2 million employees, is only less ruthless in defending its monopoly dominance and enriching its owners at the expense of UNI members all over the world. So the main beneficiaries of our 20 years of democracy have been the white monopoly capital. The billionaires who own our industries and the chief executives who demand parity with their counterparts in the USA as well as in Europe, whilst expecting wages of South African workers to be benchmarked against the levels in the sweatshop economies. At the same time, the old apartheid humiliation of black workers continues in new forms. Some big multinationals, such as Southern Sun at Sun City, continues to dismiss workers at the drop of a hat, have hidden cameras all over, sometimes allegedly in the private bathing space. Strip search staff and women, allegedly sometimes using male counterparts, impose polygraphic tests and even tolerate security guards shooting workers, nearly in all sectors that are represented in this conference, in the cleaning, security, and hotel sectors. Employers use every trick in the book to sideline and undermine all the laws that we fought for to protect the workers. We have fewer and fewer workers employed on so-called permanent basis. The permanent workers are currently being replaced at an alarming rate by the so-called casual workers, subcontracting, the undocumented migrants, as well as the continuous use of this labor brokering system, which we have correctly defined in South Africa as human trafficking. These workers have no job security and enjoy no pension and medical benefits. Again, this story of fragmentation and disempowerment is one that certain most of you are very familiar with. The South African working class and its majority also faces a massive crisis of unemployment, which rose yet again in the third quarter of 2014 to now a staggering, catastrophic 35.8%. By the more accurate expanded definition, which includes all those workers who have given up searching for employment. Of course, employment is the first cousin of poverty and inequality. Creating or cheering on these strategies of the working class fragmentization and disempowerment is a united front of big business and certain pro-business ministers in government. They have united to impose something called a National Development Plan, which is a pro-business economic program which regurgitates the leaving it to the free market philosophy which has failed our people so badly over the past 20 years. This united front of business is also bitterly opposed to our current campaign for a national minimum wage set at a rate that lifts workers out of poverty. Many employers and their mouthpieces in the press never stop complaining that workers are making unaffordable demands, they claim. They also mounting attacks on collective bargaining, on trade union rights, on the labor laws, and our dispute resolution institutions. The same bosses use the unemployed as a battering ram to force workers to work for whatever they offer or in what they call take it or leave it basis. It is within this context of these fierce challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment that you should locate what you are no doubt observing in our union movement today. I know, Philip, that the hearts of you and many others who are gathering here who played this historic role in providing support and building COSATU right from the beginning will have your hearts bleeding as you lead and read the stories of the unfolding saga of divisions at the leadership level that threatened to split this giant federation, COSATU. Basically, when you have these economic conditions playing themselves out in any democracy, in particular in the first 20 years of that democracy, as it is the case in South Africa, expect divisions, expect realignment of class forces, expect that a friend of yesterday becomes your foe tomorrow because suddenly there's divergence of views in terms of how we should respond to the crisis that is unfolding. We are currently paralyzed and wounded by those divisions that have lasted for more than 2 years now. The root of those divisions lies squarely in the different approaches to the ongoing triple crisis of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. The divisions broadly fall into a camp which is in favor of the vigorous implementation of the decisions taken by the last Congress of COSATU in 2012, and the leadership came that, without seeking a new mandate, appear to be drifting from a commitment to implement those resolutions. So in some quarters, elements of those resolutions are now regarded to have been just mistakes. The resolutions argued that we will fail to achieve this if we do not build a strong, democratic and worker-controlled trade union. This is why this Congress resolved to prioritize organizing the unorganized, particularly the vulnerable and the super-exploited workers, improve service of all members. There are tens of thousands of unorganized and vulnerable workers out there in the shopping malls, in the hotels, in the banks, in casinos, and in all the other sectors UNI is organizing. Our Congress resolutions are also recognized that it is no good recruiting these workers if we don't provide good, corrupt-free organization and effective service to the members on the basis of a workplace democracy. The leadership of our unions need to be in touch with the pulse of an increasingly desperate workforce. Behavior where union leaders act like bosses and believe that because they were once elected, can take any decision without reference to the base must become a thing of the past. Dressing such practices as democratic centralism just doesn't wash anymore. Democratic centralism is only revolutionary if it is truly democratic and principled. Not only our differences talk to a difference in the importance of corrupt-free unions, but also to the cancer of corruption more generally. Corruption has its origins in a capitalist system, but has now spread to every sphere of the South African society, including in the ANC, the government, and the trade unions themselves. Many of the divisions that we are running through in our society are in fact about pushing one another from the feeding trough and have little to do with political and or ideological differences. This is very tragic, and it's a very tragic state of affairs, requiring a decisive and forceful trade union movement that stands squarely against corruption. Should COSATU split, the danger exists of further fragmentization of the trade union movement. This is at a time where already 2/3 of the 183 registered unions in South Africa do not belong to any of the 4 existing federations. This is happening at a time when only 29% of all workers are organized into any union, and at a time when 53% of workers' wages are set unilaterally by the employers acting alone. This is at a time when only 9% of wages are set through centralized bargaining system in our country. Regrettably, we have become preoccupied with our endless boardroom fights that have nothing to do with advancing the workers' interest when actually our Rome is burning. In this sense, the divisions within COSATU are not just a setback, but are themselves an act of treason against the workers' interests. We have not given up hope, notwithstanding the external campaign to undermine every effort we make to save the Federation from splitting. We have experienced bogus security reports, surveilling from unidentified persons, allegations from unnamed sources printed in the media, and all manner of other tactics and tricks to publicly discredit the Federation. But we will not give up. With the help of the ANC and the former COSATU leaders, we hope that when you return back to your native countries, you will read a new narrative that says COSATU has avoided a total implosion, that unity has returned, and that comrades have become comrades again in a common desire to rebuild a truly democratic, independent, I underline, militant and socialist-orientated trade union movement. Because, Philip, this is a struggle, by the way, about an independent trade union movement in South Africa. Other fellows elsewhere are just very keen to transform this 29-year-old federation from the independent, militant, fighting organization that it is, that has become a reliable friend to all of you, that have become a fearless spokesperson for the interest of the most downtrodden in our society, so that it can be transformed from that to become a government apologist, a conveyor belt of the government and political parties, a sweetheart of the employers, not capable of raising a finger when these economic conditions prevail in South Africa. So we say, over our dead bodies will that be achieved. So in summary, comrades, dear friends, brothers and sisters, South Africa is faced with a quadruple, we're no longer calling triple, a quadruple crisis. First, unemployment crisis at 36%. When that happens, what do you expect? Secondly, inequalities that are the world most pronounced. When that happens, you don't expect peace. Thirdly, poverty, which have now meant that 26 million South Africans are living below poverty line. 14 million go to bed every night on empty stomachs. When that happens, don't expect peace. And lastly, corruption that is threatening every gain of the past 20 years, driven by political hyenas who have a belief that they have a right and their time have arrived to eat, and that we must cheer and clap hands when they do that. That's the nature of the South African crisis. Notwithstanding these challenges, I remain optimistic that we shall overcome them. Revolutionaries must remain optimistic that one day we shall triumph and that it shall all be behind us. These challenges are huge, but they are not insurmountable. We shall overcome one day, sang the American slaves, that we shall overcome, and that one day justice shall be done, and that we shall overcome. I wish you a very successful Indaba and enjoyable stay in our beautiful country. Thank you very much.